Did people truly abandon everything for a life of solitude in the Middle Ages? What secrets did they uncover in the wilderness, or from behind bricked-up walls? How did their extreme choices reshape the world of kings, peasants, and popes, from the deserts of Egypt to the frozen peaks of the Alps during the medieval period? Number 1. The hermit who became pope, and then a prisoner. Celestine V, born Pietro Angelerio, lived a life that would make any modern reality show look tame. He was not just a hermit. He was a hermit who somehow became pope, and then, even stranger, quit the job. He ended his life not in a grand papal palace, but as a prisoner. His story stretched from about 1215 to 1296, a long journey indeed for a man who seemed to want nothing more than to be left alone with his thoughts and his prayers. Pietro was born into a large, poor family in a small Italian village, Sant'Angelo, Limisano. From a young age, he felt a pull towards a life beyond the ordinary bustle. When he was around 20 years old, he decided to leave the world behind. He found a cave on a remote mountain called Monte Marone in the Abruzzo region of Italy. There he began his life as a hermit. This was not a temporary retreat. Pietro lived in that cave, or similar desolate spots, for decades. He dressed in rough clothes, ate simple meals, and spent his days in quiet contemplation. He did not seek out company. He sought silence and connection with the divine word of his unusual devotion spread. People curious about the man who lived like a wild animal but spoke with profound wisdom began to seek him out. They came to him with their troubles, asking for advice, seeking his prayers. Pietro was not a preacher or a grand orator. He was a simple man who lived what he believed. His sincerity was powerful. He even attracted followers who wanted to live like him. This was not his plan. He wanted solitude, but a community began to form around him, drawn by his example. He founded a new monastic order which became known as the Celestines. They followed a very strict rule, living lives of poverty and prayer, much like Pietro himself. This was a testament to his spiritual authority, a gentle power that drew people in despite his desire for isolation. Life as the head of a growing order was not exactly hermitic. Pietro tried to maintain his solitude as much as possible, retreating to even more isolated caves when he could. He was an old man by this point, well into his 70s. His body was frail, but his spirit remained strong and focused on his ascetic practices. His reputation for holiness grew far beyond the mountains of Abruzzo. People believed he could work miracles, that his prayers had special power. This widespread belief in his sanctity set the stage for the most astonishing event of his long life. In 1294, a crisis gripped the Catholic Church. The cardinals, the powerful princes of the Church, had been meeting for 2 years in Perugia to elect a new pope. They were completely deadlocked, unable to agree on a candidate. The political maneuvering and personal rivalries were intense. The situation was scandalous. The throne of St. Peter lay empty. The people of Europe were growing impatient, and some began to lose faith in the Church's leadership. Then, a letter arrived from Pietro Angelerio, the old hermit of Morone. He was well over 70 at this time, an age when most people were slowing down, certainly not getting involved in high politics. His letter was not a plea for power, it was a stern warning. He wrote that if the cardinals did not elect a pope, soon divine punishment would fall upon them. This was a startling message from a reclusive old man. Whether it was the warning, sheer desperation, or a sudden, unexpected inspiration, something shifted. Cardinal Latino Malabranca Orsini, one of the leading figures in the College of Cardinals, stood up. He declared that it was the will of God that the hermit Pietro Angelerio, the holy man of Morone, should be the next pope. The idea was absurd, yet it resonated. Pierre was a man untainted by political ambition, known only for his piety and simple life. Perhaps he was the only one who could save the Church from its own divisions. To the astonishment of everyone, including Pietro himself, the cardinals agreed on July 5, 1294. They elected the reclusive hermit as pope. Imagine the scene. Messengers were dispatched to his mountain retreat, not a grand procession, but a few individuals scrambling up rocky paths to find an old man in a cave. They found him thin and aged, living a life of extreme austerity. When they told him he was pope, he was shocked. He resisted, begging them to leave him to his solitude. But the cardinals insisted, arguing it was God's will. The people rejoiced, seeing it as a sign of divine intervention, a return to the purity of the early church. Pietro reluctantly accepted. He traveled to L'Aquila for his coronation, not Rome, which was a break from tradition. He took the name Celestine V, honoring the heavens. His papacy was brief, lasting only 5 months and 9 days. From the very beginning, it was clear that an old hermit was ill-suited for the complex and treacherous world of papal politics. He was easily manipulated by powerful figures, particularly King Charles II of Naples, who kept him close and influenced his decisions. Celestine was an innocent in a den of vipers. He appointed inexperienced cardinals, made poor administrative decisions, and was overwhelmed by the endless stream of petitions and demands. He longed for his quiet cave. He yearned for the simple rhythm of prayer and contemplation. His yearning for solitude grew stronger each day. He tried to build a small cell within the papal palace so he could live like a hermit, even as pope, but it was impossible to maintain the necessary isolation. He realized he was not serving God by remaining in a position for which he was entirely unsuited. He believed he was doing more harm than good by his presence on the throne. This was an unprecedented realization for a pope. No pope had ever voluntarily resigned. On December 13, 1294, Celestine V did the unthinkable. He issued a decree establishing the right of a pope to resign. Then he announced his own resignation. He publicly divested himself of his papal robes and symbols of office, returning to his simple monastic habit. He was an old man, and his resignation was a testament to his humility and his deep, unwavering commitment to the life he believed he was called to live. He wanted his simple cave back. He wanted to be Pietro the hermit again. Some hailed it as an act of profound humility, a holy renunciation of power. Others, especially those who opposed the next pope, Boniface VIII, condemned it as a dereliction of duty, a weakness. But for Pietro, it was an act of personal freedom and spiritual integrity. He tried to return to his hermitic life. He attempted to flee from the scrutiny and the political turmoil. But the new pope, Boniface VIII, was a shrewd and ambitious man. He feared that Pietro, the beloved former pope, could become a rallying point for opposition, a living symbol of an alternative papacy. Boniface could not allow the old man to wander freely. So, Pietro Angelerio, the hermit who became pope, was arrested. He was imprisoned in various castles, first in Monte Morone, the very mountain he once sought solitude, and then in the fortress of Fumone, high above the valley of the Sacco River. He was an old man, around 81 years old. When he became a prisoner, his final years were spent in a small, damp cell. Yet even in captivity, he maintained his spiritual practices. He continued to pray, to meditate, to live the life of an ascetic. He accepted his fate with humility, believing it to be God's will. Pietro Angelerio died in his prison cell on May 19, 1296. His life had come full circle from the solitude of a cave to the heights of papal power and back to a form of enforced solitude. He was canonized as Saint Celestine V in 1313, a recognition of his profound holiness despite or perhaps because of the extraordinary and difficult path he walked. His legacy is one of radical humility and a relentless pursuit of spiritual truth, even when it meant abandoning the most powerful office in the world. His story questions what true power really means, especially for a man who chose wilderness over worldliness and prison over pretense until the very end of his long and remarkable journey. Number 2. The Stylite, who lived on a pillar for decades. Symeon the Stylite lived a life so extreme, so utterly devoted to isolation and asceticism, that it almost defies belief. He was born around 387 C in a village in Cilicia, which is now part of Turkey, near the border with Syria. His story unfolds in the early part of what we consider the Middle Ages, and his influence on medieval spirituality was immense, inspiring many imitators and sparking countless debates about the nature of holiness. Symeon's old age was achieved on top of a pillar, a truly remarkable and unsettling thought. From a young age, Symeon felt a deep pull towards a life of intense religious devotion. He joined a monastery, but even the strict rules of monastic life were not enough for him. He sought ever greater levels of self-denial and spiritual discipline. He subjected himself to incredible austerities, fasting severely, wearing a rough hair shirt that caused constant irritation, and practicing relentless prayer. His fellow monks were astonished, and sometimes even alarmed, by his extreme practices. They worried he was going too far. One story tells of him wrapping a rope made of palm fibers tightly around his body, causing open sores and attracting worms, which he reportedly considered a part of his penance. His pursuit of spiritual perfection was total. Symeon eventually left the monastery, seeking an even more isolated existence. He found a small, isolated dwelling in a desert area. He lived there for some time, continuing his severe asceticism. But even this level of solitude was not enough for him. People began to find him drawn by his growing reputation for holiness. They came to him seeking spiritual guidance, blessings, or even just a glimpse of the holy man. Symeon wanted complete isolation from the world, not constant interaction with curious crowds. This is where Symeon's story takes its legendary turn. In about 423 C, he conceived of an idea that was utterly unprecedented. He decided to live on top of a pillar. This was not a temporary perch. This was his new home, his new monastery, his new desert. He started on a pillar that was relatively short, perhaps 6 or 10 feet high. But as his fame grew, and as he sought greater removal from the crowds that still flocked to him, he built taller and taller pillars. He lived on 4 different pillars over the course of his life, each one higher than the last. The final pillar, the one he spent the longest time on, was reportedly over 50 feet high, a towering monument to his solitary devotion. Living on a pillar presented unimaginable challenges. There was no shelter from the scorching sun, the biting winds, the torrential rains, or the freezing cold of winter nights. He had only a small platform at the top, perhaps a few feet across, where he could sit, stand, or sleep if he slept at all. He had a small railing to prevent him from falling off, but it offered little comfort. Food and water were brought up to him by disciples using ropes. He ate very little, often just bread and water. He spent his days in constant prayer, meditation, and contemplation. He famously never lay down. He would reportedly lean against the railing or stand for days on end. Accounts say he would bow repeatedly in prayer, sometimes thousands of times a day, to the point of exhaustion. His body must have suffered terribly. Exposure to the elements, lack of proper sleep, and extreme malnutrition would have taken an immense toll, yet he lived on that pillar for an astonishing 37 years. He became known as Symeon the Stylite, from the Greek word stylos, meaning pillar. Despite his efforts to escape the world, the pillar only made him more famous. Crowds of thousands from all walks of life continued to gather at the base of his pillar. Peasants, merchants, emperors, bishops, even nomadic tribes from the desert, all came to hear his words, to seek his blessing, or to witness this incredible spectacle of human devotion. He became a living oracle, a holy man whose pronouncements were taken seriously. He would preach to the crowds from his lofty perch, his voice echoing across the desert. He would offer spiritual advice, settle disputes, and occasionally even intervene in political matters. He was considered a powerful intercessor with God. People believed that simply being in his presence, even at a distance, could bring blessings or healing. His pillar became a pilgrimage site, a spiritual magnet in the landscape. Symeon the Stylite's life was a public demonstration of extreme asceticism. He believed that by denying his body, he could purify his soul and draw closer to God. His physical suffering was a form of prayer, a sacrifice offered for the salvation of humanity. He was not seeking comfort or worldly gain. He was seeking a profound spiritual connection. His commitment to this difficult path never wavered, even as he grew old atop his stone perch. He became a living legend in his own time, an emblem of radical devotion. His story is filled with accounts of his wisdom, his prophetic insights, and even miracles attributed to his prayers. He advised emperors on matters of state and rebuked those in power who acted unjustly. His influence extended across the Byzantine Empire and beyond. He was a figure of immense moral authority, all from the top of a narrow pillar. When Symeon the Stylite finally died in 459 CE, after spending well over 3 decades on his pillars, his passing was treated as a major event. He was an elderly man by the standards of his time, probably in his early 70s, and the hardships he endured on his pillar would have aged him far beyond his years. His body was reportedly guarded by soldiers to prevent zealous pilgrims from taking relics. It was then escorted by a large procession, including bishops and military commanders, to Antioch, where it was buried with great reverence. The site of his pillar became a major pilgrimage center. A large church and monastery, known as the Church of Saint Symeon the Stylite, was built around the base of his pillar. The ruins of this complex, with the remains of the pillar still standing, are still visible today in Syria, a testament to the enduring impact of this extraordinary hermit. Symeon the Stylite's life challenged conventional notions of what it meant to be a holy person. He showed that spiritual devotion could take the most radical and public forms, shaping not only the lives of individuals but also the religious landscape of an entire age. He stood, literally and figuratively, above the world, a constant reminder of the pursuit of a spiritual life beyond earthly comforts, enduring until his final years high above the dust of the world. Number 3. The German abbess who heard God's voice and advised emperors. Hildegard of Bingen, born in 1098 in Bermersheim, Germany, was far more than just an elderly nun. She was a visionary, a composer, a philosopher, a playwright, a medical writer, a theologian, and a political advisor. She lived a long life, dying at the age of 81 in 1179, an extraordinary age for the medieval period. Her story is one of a woman who, despite the limitations placed on her gender in her era, wielded immense influence through her profound spiritual experiences and her keen intellect. From a very young age, Hildegard experienced vivid spiritual visions. She described these as the living light, an overwhelming divine illumination that presented itself not as dreams or trances, but as clear, waking perceptions. She was just 3 years old when she had her first vision of a divine light. She kept these experiences mostly to herself for many years, fearful of being misunderstood or even condemned. Her family, noble but not wealthy, offered her as a tithe to the church, a common practice at the time. At the age of 8, she was sent to live at the Benedictine monastery of Disibodenberg, where she was placed under the care of Jutta of Sponheim, an anchoress. Jutta taught Hildegard to read and write, and introduced her to a life of prayer and study. When Jutta died in 1136, Hildegard, then 38 years old, was elected magistra, or head, of the community of nuns at Disibodenberg. This was a position of authority, but still within the confines of a monastery. It was around this time, when she was in her early 40s, that her visions became even more intense and insistent. For years, Hildegard had kept silent about her visions, fearing judgment. But in 1141, at the age of 43, she experienced a powerful vision that compelled her to write down everything she saw and heard from the divine light. She later described it as a command from God. She was physically weak, plagued by illness throughout her life, but the spiritual imperative was undeniable. She hesitated, still wrestling with fear and self-doubt. But with the encouragement of a monk named Volmar, who became her lifelong secretary, and the abbot of Disibodenberg, she began to dictate her visions. This monumental work, her first great theological text, was called Scivias, meaning "Know the ways of the Lord." As she dictated, Scivias' word of her visions reached powerful figures. Pope Eugenius III heard of her through Bernard of Clairvaux, a hugely influential abbot of the time. The Pope sent a commission to investigate her visions. They reported favorably, confirming her prophecies were genuine. This papal endorsement was a turning point. It gave Hildegard immense authority and legitimacy, allowing her to speak and write freely, without fear of persecution. It also marked the beginning of her public life as a recognized prophet and mystic. With her newfound recognition, Hildegard felt a divine command to move her community of nuns from the male monastery at Disibodenberg to an independent convent at Rupertsberg near Bingen. The monks at Disibodenberg resisted, as they benefited from the income and prestige the nuns brought. But Hildegard, with her visionary authority, was unyielding. She saw it as a divine instruction to give her nuns more autonomy and to escape the cramped conditions. Despite strong opposition, she succeeded, and in 1150 the community moved to Rupertsberg. Later, she founded a second monastery for her nuns in Eibingen. These moves showed her formidable determination and her ability to lead and negotiate, even against powerful male figures. From her monastery at Rupertsberg, Hildegard became a highly sought-after advisor. Kings, queens, emperors, archbishops, and popes wrote to her, seeking her guidance and wisdom. She engaged in extensive correspondence with some of the most powerful figures of her time. She did not shy away from criticizing those in authority, including the Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, when she believed they were acting contrary to God's will. She exhorted them to reform, to seek justice, and to uphold the spiritual well-being of their people. Her letters show her sharp intellect and her moral courage. She was not just a hermit in contemplation. She was a hermit with a powerful voice that reached the very pinnacles of medieval power. Hildegard also went on 4 major preaching tours in her later life, traveling far from her monastery. This was highly unusual for a woman in the Middle Ages, especially an abbess. She preached to both clergy and laity, urging them to spiritual renewal and repentance. She spoke with compelling authority, captivating audiences with her insights, her eloquence, and her profound understanding of Scripture and divine truth. Her willingness to leave her cloister and engage directly with the world showed her deep commitment to her prophetic mission. Her creative output was astonishing, Beyond Civius, she wrote two more major visionary works, Liber Vitae Meritorum, Book of the Rewards of Life, and Liber Divinorum Operum, Book of Divine Works, both filled with intricate allegories and profound theological insights derived from her visions. She also wrote extensively on natural history and medicine, compiling two books, Physica and Causae et Curae, which detailed the healing properties of plants, stones, and animals, as well as theories on the human body and disease. She had a remarkable understanding of the natural world, seeing it as a reflection of divine order. Hildegard was also a pioneering composer. She created a vast body of liturgical music, including a cycle of songs and a morality play called Ordo Virtutum, Order of the Virtues. Her music is distinct, featuring soaring melodies and a wide vocal range. She believed her musical compositions were inspired by her visions, a direct expression of the harmony of the cosmos and the divine. Her work stands as a testament to her unique artistic genius and her deep spiritual connection. Throughout her long life, Hildegard continued to experience her visions. She was often physically weak, suffering from various illnesses that she described as the physical manifestation of her spiritual struggles. Yet, she persevered, driven by a profound sense of divine purpose. She lived to be 81 years old, a truly venerable age in the 12th century, especially for someone who had endured chronic illness and such an active, demanding life. She saw generations pass, witnessed great political changes, and left an indelible mark on the intellectual and spiritual landscape of her time. When she died in 1179, her passing was deeply mourned. Her legacy was immense. She established a model for female, intellectual, and spiritual authority that was almost unparalleled in the Middle Ages. Her writings were copied and circulated widely. Her music was performed. Her reputation as a saintly visionary spread far and wide. Although her formal canonization took many centuries, she was venerated as a saint immediately after her death. Pope Benedict XVI formally declared her a Doctor of the Church in 2012, recognizing her as one of the most important theological figures in Christian history, a testament to the enduring impact of her prophetic visions and her powerful voice that echoed from her monastic cell across the medieval world. She proved that even from a cloister, an old woman could be a force of nature. Number 4. The anchorite who saw all shall be well. Julian of Norwich, born around 1342, is one of the most enigmatic and deeply profound mystics of the Middle Ages. Her real name is unknown. Julian refers to the Church of St. Julian in Norwich, England, where she lived as an anchoress. An anchoress was a woman who chose to live a life of extreme seclusion, voluntarily enclosed within a small cell, typically attached to a church. She spent many decades of her life into her old age in this tiny cell, making her one of history's most notable elderly hermits and mystics. She was alive during some of the most tumultuous times in English history, including the Black Death, which devastated Europe, and the Peasants' Revolt. Little is known for certain about Julian's early life. We do not know her family background, or how she came to choose the path of an anchorite. Her decision to become an anchoress was a radical act of devotion, a complete withdrawal from the world. Her cell, often called an anchor hold, was usually a small room, with a window looking into the church, allowing her to participate in services and receive the Eucharist. Another small window or squint might open onto the outside world, allowing her to receive food and speak to visitors. This was her entire world for decades. The central event of Julian's life, and the source of her enduring fame, occurred on May 8, 1373, when she was about 30 or 31 years old. She was gravely ill, on what she believed to be her deathbed. A priest came to administer the last rites, holding a crucifix before her. As she gazed upon it, she experienced a series of 15 vivid visions or showings over several hours. A 16th vision followed the next night. These were not dreams or hallucinations, she maintained, but direct spiritual encounters with divine love, particularly focusing on the suffering of Christ and the boundless love of God. Her visions were intense and deeply personal. She saw the bleeding crown of thorns on Christ's head, felt his immense pain, and witnessed the boundless love of God for humanity. One of the most famous parts of her visions involved her seeing a small object in the palm of her hand, no bigger than a hazelnut. She was told it contained everything that was made. She marveled that something so small could contain so much. And then she heard that it existed and continued to exist because God loved it. This profound insight that all of creation is sustained by love became a cornerstone of her mystical understanding. Another key moment in her visions was her struggle with the problem of sin and suffering in the world. She questioned how, if God was all-loving, there could be so much evil and pain. In response, she heard a voice that famously declared, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." This message of ultimate hope and reassurance, despite the evidence of a broken world, became her most enduring legacy. It was a radical message of unconditional love and divine optimism in an era marked by plague, war, and social unrest. After these visions, Julian miraculously recovered from her illness. She understood that her purpose now was to live out and reflect upon these divine communications. She spent the next 20 years in intense meditation and prayer, striving to fully understand the meaning of her showings. This long period of contemplative study is itself a testament to her deep spiritual commitment. Sometime after 1393, she wrote the long text of her Revelations of Divine Love, expanding upon an earlier, shorter version. This book is a unique and deeply personal account of her mystical experiences, offering profound theological insights in plain, accessible language. It is remarkable for being the first book written by a woman in the English language. Her insights into God's love are considered revolutionary, moving away from a punitive God and towards a God who is endlessly merciful and loving, embracing both male and female aspects. She referred to God as both Father and Mother, a revolutionary concept for her time. Julian lived as an anchoress for a very long time, likely for over 40 years. We know she was still alive in 1416, as she is mentioned in a will from that year, indicating she was quite old, likely in her early to mid-70s, which was a very advanced age in the 15th century. She spent her final decades in her cell, a quiet witness to a turbulent world, providing spiritual counsel to those who sought her out. Despite her physical enclosure, her spiritual influence reached far beyond her cell. People from all walks of life came to her window, seeking her wisdom. Clergy, lay people, rich and poor, even other mystics like Marjorie Kempe, journeyed to Norwich to speak with the wise old anchoress. Julian became a spiritual guide, offering solace, advice, and a unique perspective on divine love that offered hope in a time of widespread despair. She was known for her gentle demeanor and her comforting words, always pointing callers towards the boundless love of God. Her physical isolation served to amplify her spiritual authority. She was not distracted by the world. She was focused entirely on God. Her life as an anchoress involved extreme simplicity and self-sufficiency within her confined space. She would have had a small garden plot nearby for herbs or fresh air, tended by an assistant. Her days would have been structured around prayer, contemplation, and interaction with those who came to her window. She would have observed the cycles of the liturgical year through her window into the church. Her cell was her personal desert, a place of spiritual struggle and profound revelation. Julian of Norwich's Revelations of Divine Love offers a theology rooted in experience rather than abstract reasoning. It speaks directly to the human condition, acknowledging suffering but always affirming the ultimate triumph of divine love. Her vision of a loving, compassionate God stands in stark contrast to some of the more fear-based theology of her time. Her willingness to grapple with profound theological questions from the perspective of an anchoress and to articulate her answers with such clarity and compassion makes her a unique voice in medieval spirituality. Her legacy endures as a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of contemplative life. Her writings continue to be read and studied by people of all faiths, offering comfort and profound spiritual insight. From the confines of her tiny cell in Norwich, an elderly woman articulated a vision of God's love that transcended the limitations of her time, reminding us that even in the darkest hours, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Her quiet life of extreme seclusion yielded a message that continues to resonate centuries later. Number 5. The Swiss Hermit Who United a Nation. Nicholas of Flue, born in 1417 in Saxeln, Switzerland, was a truly remarkable figure who lived to the ripe old age of 70, dying in 1487. He was a husband, a father of 10, a farmer, a soldier, a judge, and then at the age of 50, he made a radical choice to become a hermit. His transition from a prominent community leader to a reclusive mystic and his subsequent influence as a spiritual and political peacemaker solidified his place as a revered figure in Swiss history. Nicholas grew up in a rural mountainous region typical of Switzerland. He was a respected member of his community, known for his integrity and piety. He married Dorothea Wyss, and together they built a life, raising a large family of 5 sons and 5 daughters. He was a successful farmer, managing his land and providing for his family. His responsibilities did not stop there. He served as a soldier in various conflicts, defending his canton of Walden in skirmishes against neighboring regions. He was also a respected judge and a member of the local council, indicating his standing and influence in his community. He was a man deeply embedded in the secular world, living a full and active life. However, beneath this outwardly conventional life, Nicholas experienced a profound inner spiritual struggle. He felt a growing call to a more contemplative and solitary existence. This was not a sudden impulse. He reportedly experienced visions and periods of deep spiritual yearning for many years. He wrestled with the idea of leaving his family and his worldly responsibilities to pursue a life completely devoted to God. This decision was agonizing, especially given his large family and his duties to his community. After much deliberation, and with the reluctant but understanding consent of his wife, Dorothea, Nicholas made the momentous decision to leave his home. He was 50 years old, an age when most people were settling into their routines, not abandoning them entirely. In 1467 he left his family and set off. His initial intention was to travel to a distant monastery, but a mystical experience, perhaps a vision, on the way led him to stop. He felt called to remain in his home valley, but in complete solitude. He found a secluded spot in the Ranst Gorge, a wild and rugged area near his hometown. There he built a simple cell, a small hut made of wood and stone. This became his hermitage. It was an incredibly desolate and forbidding place, perfectly suited for the extreme solitude he sought. He lived there alone for the next 20 years of his life. What is truly astonishing about Nicholas of Flue's hermitic life is his reported sustenance. For the entire 2 decades he lived in the Ranst, he is said to have eaten nothing but the Holy Eucharist, the consecrated bread of the Catholic Mass. He reportedly consumed no other food or drink. This claim, if true, is physiologically astounding and remains a subject of intense debate and religious awe. Contemporary accounts and later church investigations supported this claim, attributing it to a miraculous sustenance from God. Whether literal or symbolic, it speaks to an extraordinary level of asceticism and spiritual dedication. His body, in his old age, sustained itself in a way that defied normal human limits. Nicholas of Flue became known as Brother Klaus to the people. Despite his physical isolation, he remained spiritually connected to the world, and the world eventually found its way to him. People from all over Switzerland and even beyond began to flock to his hermitage. They came seeking his advice, his prayers, and his wisdom. He became a spiritual guide, a confessor, and a source of comfort for thousands. His wisdom was simple, direct, and rooted in his profound spiritual experience. He often spoke in parables and proverbs, which resonated deeply with the common people. His influence extended far beyond individual spiritual guidance. In 1481, Switzerland faced a severe political crisis. The Swiss Confederacy, a loose alliance of independent cantons, was on the verge of civil war. Tensions between the rural, more traditional cantons and the newer, more urban ones were at an all-time high. A diet, or assembly, was held in stands to resolve the disputes, but the delegates were deadlocked, unable to reach an agreement. The very future of Switzerland was at stake. In desperation, one of the delegates, Heinrich Instedt, a parish priest who knew Brother Klaus well, suggested that they consult the hermit of Ranst. Despite the initial skepticism from some, the delegates agreed. Instedt journeyed to Nicholas's hermitage in the gorge. He presented the hermit with the dilemma and asked for his counsel. Nicholas of Flue, the old hermit who had sworn off the world, listened carefully. He reflected on the situation. His advice was profound in its simplicity and clarity. He urged the cantons to put aside their differences to prioritize unity and common good over individual interests. He appealed to their shared faith and their historical bonds. He reportedly suggested that they should not extend their alliance too widely, but rather strengthen their internal unity. He also advised them to avoid taking land from others and to resolve disputes peacefully. Instedt returned to the Diet of Stands and relayed Brother Klaus's message. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The delegates, who had been unable to find common ground for weeks, suddenly reached a compromise. The Stands Agreement, which incorporated Nicholas's advice, was signed, saving the Confederacy from collapse and laying the groundwork for the modern Swiss nation. This was a monumental achievement, credited almost entirely to the wisdom of the old hermit. He became known as a peacemaker, a national patron saint, even before his formal canonization. Nicholas of Flue continued his solitary life in the Rant Gorge, receiving pilgrims and offering counsel until his death in 1487. He was 70 years old, having spent his last 2 decades in extreme asceticism and constant prayer. His passing was widely mourned, and his hermitage became a major pilgrimage site, which it remains today. His cell and a small chapel built near it are places of quiet reverence. His legacy is immense, not just for Switzerland, where he is considered a national saint and a symbol of unity, but for the broader understanding of holiness. He demonstrated that a life of extreme renunciation could also be a life of immense public service. He proved that even from the depths of a secluded gorge, an elderly man's wisdom could change the course of a nation, proving that true influence often comes from the most unexpected quiet places. His life remains a powerful testament to faith, discipline, and the profound impact of a spirit truly detached from worldly desires. Number 6. The founder of Western monasticism, who lived to an old age in solitude. Saint Benedict of Nursia, born around 480 CE in Nursia, Italy, is a towering figure in the history of Western monasticism. He is often called the father of Western monasticism because his foundational work, The Rule of Saint Benedict, became the blueprint for monastic life across Europe for centuries. He lived a life that culminated in old age, dying around 547 CE, after establishing a way of life that shaped the spiritual, intellectual, and even economic landscape of the Middle Ages. Benedict came from a privileged background, but he grew disillusioned with the moral decay and corruption he observed in Rome, where he had been sent for his education. The urban environment, with its temptations and distractions, was not what he sought. At a young age, possibly around 20, he decided to abandon his studies and withdraw from society. His nurse, Cyrilla, initially accompanied him, but he soon sought a deeper solitude. He found a remote cave in the Subiaco Mountains, east of Rome. This was a wild and rugged region far from any towns or human habitation. For 3 years he lived there in complete solitude. A monk named Romanus helped him, providing him with simple food by lowering it down a rope to his cave. Benedict dedicated himself to a life of intense prayer, fasting, and contemplation. He wore a rough habit and sought to purify his soul through asceticism. This period of extreme isolation was his spiritual crucible, shaping his understanding of monastic life. During this time, he faced numerous temptations and spiritual struggles. Legends tell of him wrestling with the devil in the form of a blackbird, or overcoming intense lust by throwing himself naked into a thorn bush. These stories highlight the intense inner battles he fought to achieve spiritual mastery in his isolation. Word of his holiness, even in his extreme solitude, began to spread. Shepherds and local people discovered his hermitage. They were drawn by his spiritual authority and sought his guidance. Eventually, a group of monks from a nearby monastery, Vicovaro, whose abbot had recently died, asked Benedict to become their new leader. Benedict initially resisted. He knew their monastic community was lax and unruly, and he foresaw that his strict discipline would be unwelcome. He told them he would be too severe for them. They insisted, however, and he eventually agreed. As he predicted, his strict rule was too much for them. The monks resented his reforms and even attempted to poison him. According to tradition, when he blessed the poisoned cup, it shattered. Benedict, undeterred but understanding the danger, quietly left the monastery and returned to his solitude at Subiaco. Despite this setback, disciples continued to flock to him. He found that complete isolation was not sustainable if he was to guide others. So, in the valley of Subiaco, he began to establish a series of 12 small monasteries, each with 12 monks and an abbot, under his general supervision. This was the beginning of his true calling as a founder of communities. He taught them the discipline of prayer, manual labor, and communal life. Around 529 CE, Benedict left Subiaco and moved to Monte Cassino, a hilltop overlooking the town of Cassino, about 80 miles southeast of Rome. Here he established what would become the most famous Benedictine monastery. On this strategic hill, which had previously been a pagan temple, he built the monastery that would serve as the model for Western monasticism. It was at Monte Cassino that Benedict wrote his most enduring work, The Rule for Monasteries, commonly known as the Rule of Saint Benedict. This text was a revolutionary guide for monastic life. It provided a balanced and practical framework for living in community, emphasizing moderation, stability, obedience, humility, and daily prayer, known as the Opus Dei, or work of God. It prescribed a daily routine of prayer, study, manual labor, and communal meals. Unlike earlier, more extreme ascetic rules, Benedict's rule was adaptable and emphasized common sense and charity. It aimed to create a stable, self-sufficient community where monks could pursue holiness in an orderly and disciplined way. Benedict lived out his later years at Monte Cassino, serving as its abbot and guiding his monks. He was known for his wisdom, his gentleness, and his ability to discern the spirits of his monks. He performed miracles, including raising the dead, and had prophetic visions. He advised popes and emperors, and his influence spread widely even during his lifetime. He became a respected figure throughout Italy, sought out for his counsel and his spiritual power. By the time of his death around 547 CE, Benedict was an old man, probably in his late 60s or early 70s. He died surrounded by his monks at Monte Cassino. His legacy, however, was just beginning. Over the next few centuries, the rule of Saint Benedict spread throughout Europe. It became the most widely adopted monastic rule, leading to the foundation of thousands of Benedictine monasteries. These monasteries became centers of learning and culture during the Dark Ages, preserving classical texts, developing agricultural techniques, and providing education and healthcare. They played a crucial role in the evangelization of Europe and the shaping of its intellectual and spiritual identity. The stability and structure provided by Benedict's rule were essential for the survival and flourishing of knowledge and spiritual life during a turbulent period. Saint Benedict's journey from a solitary cave hermit to the revered patriarch of Western monasticism is a testament to his profound spiritual insight and his remarkable organizational skills. He understood that while individual asceticism had its place, communal life governed by a wise and balanced rule offered a more sustainable and able path to holiness for the many. His influence, radiating from his final hermitage at Monte Cassino, continued to shape the spiritual and intellectual landscape of Europe for over 1,000 years, proving that the quiet devotion of an old hermit could lay the foundation for an entire civilization. Number 7. The father of hermits who battled demons in the desert, Saint Anthony the Great, born around 251 C in a village called Coma in Upper Egypt, is widely regarded as the founder and father of Christian monasticism, especially the eremitic or solitary form. He lived an exceptionally long life, dying at the age of 105 in 356 CE. His extraordinary dedication to a life of extreme solitude in the desert, battling internal and external demons, set a powerful precedent for hermits and mystics throughout the Middle Ages, influencing countless individuals who sought a similar path of withdrawal from the world. His parents died when he was around 18 or 20 years old, leaving him with a considerable inheritance and the responsibility for his younger sister. One day, while attending church, he heard the gospel reading from Matthew chapter 19, verse 21. "If you want to be perfect, go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come." Then he took these words literally and immediately. He sold all his property, gave the proceeds to the poor, entrusted his sister to a community of virgins, and set out to live an ascetic life. His initial period of asceticism was not in complete isolation. He first lived near his own village, studying under an older hermit, learning the discipline of fasting, prayer, and manual labor. He practiced extreme self-denial, eating very little, sleeping on the bare ground, and spending long hours in prayer. He worked with his hands to earn a meager living, giving away any surplus to the poor. But this was not enough for Anthony. He sought a deeper solitude, a more direct confrontation with his inner self and with spiritual forces. He moved further into the desert. Finding a deserted tomb to live in here, he began his legendary battles with demons. According to his biography, written by Athanasius of Alexandria, Anthony faced terrifying temptations and physical assaults from demons who tried to lure him back to the world, or to break his spirit with fear and despair. They appeared in various forms, as beautiful women, wild beasts, or monstrous figures. Anthony resisted them through prayer, fasting, and unwavering faith. These accounts of his struggles became immensely popular, inspiring and guiding future hermits in their own spiritual warfare. After about 15 years in the tomb, Anthony sought even greater isolation. Around 285 C, he crossed the Nile River and ventured deep into the eastern desert, finding an abandoned Roman fort on a remote mountain called Mount Colzim, near the Red Sea. He walled himself inside this fort, living in complete solitude for the next 20 years. He grew a small garden for food, and occasionally received bread thrown over the wall by visitors. During this period, he saw no one and spoke to no one. This was the epitome of eremitic life, a lone individual pitted against the vastness of the desert and the intensity of his own spirit. Yet, like many hermits, Anthony's extreme solitude paradoxically attracted others. News of his piety, his spiritual battles, and his serene detachment spread. People, eager to imitate his asceticism or to seek his spiritual guidance, flocked to his desert fort. In 305 C, after 2 decades of complete isolation, Anthony emerged. He was reportedly vibrant and healthy, appearing unaffected by his harsh asceticism. He found a large group of disciples gathered around him, eager to learn. Anthony began to organize these scattered hermits into a loose community, providing spiritual direction and teaching them how to live a disciplined life in the desert. He established a system where hermits lived in individual cells, but came together for communal worship and instruction. This was not a formal monastery with a strict rule in the Western sense, but rather a collection of cells under the guidance of a respected elder. These early monastic settlements were known as loras. He became a spiritual father to thousands. People came from far and wide, from ordinary peasants to scholars and even Roman emperors, to hear his wisdom. He was known for his humility, his practical advice, and his deep understanding of human nature. He preached against heresy, encouraged perseverance, and emphasized the importance of humility and inner peace. He also famously left his solitude twice to go to Alexandria to support the church during persecutions and theological disputes, showing that his withdrawal was not a rejection of the world, but a means to serve it spiritually. Anthony continued to live in the desert for the rest of his long life. He lived in 2 main locations, his inner mountain cell and an even more remote spot called the outer mountain. He always sought to maintain a degree of solitude, even as he guided his growing number of disciples. His life became a living example of how to live a life totally dedicated to God, stripped of all worldly possessions and distractions. By the time of his death, in 356 C, Anthony was an extraordinarily old man, reportedly 105 years old. He instructed his disciples to bury his body in a secret, unmarked grave to prevent it from becoming a pilgrimage site or a source of veneration. This was his final act of humility, a desire to remain hidden from the world even in death, just as he had lived in solitude. St. Anthony's life, chronicled by Athanasius in the Life of Antony, became an immediate bestseller and had a profound impact throughout the Christian world. It inspired countless men and women to embrace the monastic life, whether in the solitude of the desert or in communal settings. It became a spiritual roadmap for self-denial prayer and the pursuit of holiness. His struggles with demons were seen as an allegory for the inner spiritual battles all Christians face. His story provided a powerful model for those seeking a radical commitment to faith, shaping the spiritual landscape of the Middle Ages and beyond. His journey from a wealthy youth to an ancient hermit, living beyond the reach of normal human desires, truly established him as the archetype of the holy recluse.